Charles Barkley, he said, as much as I love Steph Curry and I love Steph Curry, I don't know how many times you can say that. Can you imagine the bad boys beating the hell out of? Why would I want to imagine that? If you think he could take those blows that John Sally, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer, those body checks that they were putting on Michael and Scotty and myself and guys like that, you really think Steph Curry wouldn't break? How did this even be brought up that Charles Barkley was talking about Steph Curry and the bad boys?
So he was on Bill Simmons' podcast, and they were talking about how back in their day, back in Barkley's day, I should say, that modern medicine wasn't what it was back then that it is now. They're talking like, hey, if Bird played in this generation with his bad back, he probably would have played another 5-6 years. If Curry played in the 80s, he probably wouldn't have played as long because he had the early ankle injuries in his career. They're just kind of talking like, if the Bad Boy Pistons played against Steph Curry, he would be hobbling every night, and he'd probably just be shooting from the outside. He wouldn't even try to go around the painted area with Rick Mahorn and Dennis Rodman and John Sally and all those guys. I think that's what Charles Barkley was trying to say. And I know a lot of people took offense to what Barkley was saying because Steph Curry, in my opinion, I think he's kind of catapulted. I don't know if you saw, he thinks that he's like the second best point guard behind Magic Johnson as of late. Like he's kind of like,
I have no issue with that. He changed the game.
Yeah, I know some people still think it's Isaiah, but hey, those are debates, and I'll let fans have those debates. I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but I think that's what Barkley was trying to say, like saying, hey, like, if Steph played my era against those Bad Boy Pistons, yeah, he probably wouldn't have played more than 6 years.
See, that I hate when they do that though. Like, I hate that we don't think that these guys would adjust their game. Steph Curry is going to be great no matter what era he plays in, whether he plays for 6 years or whether he plays for 20 years. He's going to be great no matter what. My biggest issue is, why do they? I mean, I get why they always bring the bad boys up because you see primarily a ton of highlights of them knocking people over. But every team was doing that in this era. They just say, yeah, it would be hard for him to play in the 80s because a handful. Like, why not even just throw in Charles Oakley's name? He was pretty rough. Kurt Rambis, I'm pretty sure he clotheslined a guy after he got clotheslined. Kevin McHale, he was pretty dirty too. I just have more of an issue with it that it's always the bad boys and it's always these guys being brought up. But whatever, your reputation, that's what it is. I think Steph Curry would be fine. I think he would adjust. I think he would be tougher. I mean, if he grew up always playing basketball that way, he'd be used to it by the time he got to the NBA.
Yeah, like this is where I would probably disagree with Chuck. I think Steph Curry would adapt. Because I think of guys like Mark Price on the Cavs, who was kind of an outside shooter. Steph's dad kind of played in that era too, and he was a good shooter. Like I think Steph would be fine. I think they think that if Steph's not going to go to the lane if he sees a Rick Mahorn, right, or a Bill Laimbeer. He's just not. He's just going to play from the outside. He's going to play from the 3-point line. He's not going to go and try to get layups or anything like that because that's not really his game. I think he would do fine in that era. And I kind of hate that a lot of the older generation can't just give the younger generation their flowers without saying like, oh, you couldn't play in my era. You're too soft. Like, I hate that.
Yeah, they just don't appreciate greatness. I even feel like if you were just to pick Steph Curry up and put him in that area, he'd be fine. Like just how he is right now. I think he'd be fine. I think he'd adjust. I don't know. I think these conversations are crazy. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of guys from every era. I mean, the further you go back, the less the player pool is. But I feel like you can even go back in the 70s and like it's like a grab claw machine. If you were to pick Jerry West and put him in today's NBA and give him like a week, he'd still probably average like 28 points per game in today's NBA. I mean, if you ever go back and watch some of his old games, because I know there's a few of them on YouTube and I've done this, he looks a step ahead. He looks like a modern player playing in that era. And I feel like you did the same thing with like Pistol Pete. He'd be fine. If you did it with Dominique Wilkins, and that's a little bit closer to this era, he'd be perfectly fine. And then I feel like you can take pretty much every player in today's NBA, put it back in those eras, and they'd be fine. They'd adjust and they'd be great.